evening to you all viewers. My name is Omar Janneh, and we are here tonight to discuss about the issue of our time, about the war and politics. So you can sit back and relax and watch my comments about the global politics, about the catastrophe, the coming wars, and about the United Nations. So I thank you all for your kind patience. You can sit back and watch. This is the Genesis. This is not a word of a prophet, but this is a clear prophecy. A new age is upon us, yet the past refuses to rest in its shallow grave. The old wall of mischief making and bloodshed have already unleashed out, in order to make room for the new world order of righteousness and peace through patriotism. For the past 10,000 years, we have had to live in an evilous world that was designed to destroy man's peace and to shed his blood. All around the world, there has not been one section of the world in which the original man has been, or where he now lives, that has not been ruled or touched by the evil of the gods of the old world. The exploitation of democracy across the world, spreading the Greek ideology. Prophet Abraham, Moses, and Jesus all declared the evolution of humanity is bloody and dramatic. In the fall of ancient Babylon, Jeremiah, page 50, verse 46, at the noise of the taking of Babylon, the earth is moved, and the cries were heard among nations. History teaches us, and we see today, at the fall of the old world, that there was a great noise of war, the fighting of wars, destruction of nations, towns and cities, and the killings of innocents, the Western invasion of the Middle East and the Muslim world entirely, the creating of a proxy war in Syria between America and Russia. There is a disagreement between the heads of nations. The world thinks the United States never sponsored terrorism. Without U.S. annual weapon deployment to Israel, that later will cause massacres in Palestine. Like the massacres in Yemen, the United States manufactured missiles and M16. The United States has sponsored terrorism and the toppling of government, especially in its backyard, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. The United States and Israel took over from Britain as the ruling state in the world. The United States is flying at hard because it is about to cross. It is a very dreadful time that the population of Earth is now living. This could be a time of destruction of the world. It is not to be compared with the destruction of an organization or a few towns, as it was in the days of Noah. The destruction I'm talking about today is the destruction of the entire world. It can only be done with a nuclear weapon, which nations are preparing for. The prophets couldn't have given us much a better picture of what we are expecting today than what took forth in the fall of ancient Babylon. The earth, land, and sea, and even the air are all set in the areas of battle. Every kind of deadly weapons are in fashion now to be used by man against his own brother. The US dropping of an atomic bomb on Japan, the use of chemicals weapon by Saddam in Iran, the use of chlorine, mustard, and sarin gas in the Syrian civil war imposed by the United States and its ally. There cannot be any peace for man under this evilous condition of corruption on the land. The United States so-called wars in the Muslim world is a pretext to destabilize the Muslim and Islam in general. Man shall taste a part of what his hand has wrought. Solely we shall taste what our own hand has wrought. Then we shall strike and annihilate our own kind with the weapons of mass destruction. In 1948, the United States atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is a subject of the United States and Israeli mind control. The United States total control of the entire global political, economic, and military platforms. The world is worse and dangerous today than ever before. The rise of nation, the idea of supremacy or superpower has led nations of the world. This threatens the security of the global population and global peace at all. In September 2006, Democratic Republic of Korea withdraw from the IAEA, the Treaty for the to ban nuclear weapons on chemical weapons because the United States has failed to keep the sides of the nuclear treaty. After the decades of isolation, the DPRK remains firm, stronger and more prosperous than ever before. A nation at grief, a nation with pain and vengeance, North Korea standing by a 5 million strong army for any US incursion into the Korean Sea. The CIA has even acknowledged that North Korea has gone beyond expected, with a 6 nuclear weapon test in 2015 along the Sea of Japan. Technology has speedily prepared man for the coming of total destruction. The United States has installed a third battery in South Korea. The Chinese and Russians do the same. The United States military buildup has made Southeast Asia a very fragile corner of the world. Human evolution will end up in a bloody catastrophe. Governments, arms and dangerous military demonstration together with invasion by the dominant power. The fall of the greatest institution being the United Nations. The United Nations will fail as did the League of Nations that failed to prevent the outbreak of the Second World War. The United Nations wouldn't prevent the already planned Third World War. The global crisis on the rise and the fear of a nuclear war is imminent. The United Nations couldn't prevent a nuclear war and other threats to a nuclear war. North Korea and Israel is a clear example. In the rise of these nations' dream for a nuclear power state and recognition, Pyongyang's dream of a nuclear power state have been achieved in a very short period. This is what brought America to the negotiation table after the sanctions against North Korea were no longer effective. Between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, nuclear warfare and strategic defense initiative will totally destroy man in the end. The United Nations has turned blind eye to the Middle Eastern crisis, while the United States turned the Middle East into a battleground in its so-called war on terror, perhaps war on the Muslim and Islam in general. After the Twin Tower blast, the United States launched its bloody campaign of terror in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and parts of the Muslim world. The violent spreading mentality of the United States has devastated families. Violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social or racial problem. It merely creates new and more complicated ones. Violence is impractical because it is descending spiral ending in deaths and destructions of the innocents. It is immoral because it is driven by hate and not love, and it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather convert or win his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather convert. It destroys communities, brotherhood, nations, towns and cities. It established evil in the hearts of mankind. It created bitterness in survivors and arrogance in the oppressors. Violence is not a solution to mankind's problem. The P5+1 or the JCPOA, the Joint Complementary Plans of Action between Iran and the P5 or the 5 powers of the Security Council. This is a shining example. This shows that without violence or war, but with dialogue and understanding, mankind is capable of accepting our differences among ourselves, either political, economic, or religious differences. Politics has divided the world so much. Politics has turned the human evolution so bloody and dramatic. Human buildings, weapons to annihilate one another or to conquer the planet, the inventions of weapons of mass destruction, to emphasize power, mind, or whatever they might be. This has converted our knowledge to ignorance, from the primitive errors to the modernization of politics. Man hasn't learned much, but with history kept repeating itself. The United Nations, the greatest and largest political organization, the so-called unity of nations, an institution that systematically divides nations, the dominant influence exercised by the permanent members through the use of this veto power in the Security Council resolution. The use of this veto power has prevented many agreements on such problems where the disarmament and the South African apartheid, the Israeli takeover of Palestine, the occupation of Kashmir, the Rohingya exodus of Myanmar, the Syrian civil war, and so forth and so forth. With the veto power, effective solution has not been found to the Middle Eastern crisis. Examples are in Syria, in Iran, and the war against Daesh, the United States recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, with its continued vetoes on every proposal against the people of Israel. Members of the Security Councils are not prepared to surrender their sovereignty to the United Nations. The United Nations has been guilty of a double standard. The United Nations turned a blind eye to the occupation and division of the Palestinian land, the Western Sahara annexed by Morocco, the occupation of Crimea in Ukraine by Russia, the occupation of the Falkland by the British, the occupation of Abkhazia, so forth and so forth. The reason why the United Nations will fail because the United Nations have given thousands of promises that they couldn't keep. In the Millennium Summit of the United Nations in the year 2000, September 8. Each day, billions of people do not eat enough to satisfy their hunger. Yet this atrocious condition shouldn't exist according to the United Nations. My first priority is the eradication of extreme poverty, so spoken by the then Secretary General and now the late Kofi Annan on September 8, year 2000, to the assembly of the world's most powerful men and women. They had come together for the United Nations Millennium Summit, during which several leaders made frank comments on the problems of the world's poor. Extreme poverty is an affront to humanity, said by the Vice President of Brazil. The Prime Minister of Britain went even further when he says that there is a dismal record of failure in Africa on the part of the developed world that sunk and sank our civilization. These two speakers made plain that nations have disgraced themselves by failing to do what they could to feed starving humans. As a proof of will to improve the living conditions for all on earth, those attended the United Nations Millennium Summit committed themselves to action in an 8-part resolution that include the following. We will not spare no effort to free our fellow humans from the conditions of extreme poverty to which more than a billion of them are currently subjected to. We resolve further by the year 2015, the proportion of the world's poor whose income is less than $1 a day, and the proportion of the people who suffer from hunger. What progress has been made toward the noble goals 18 years today? In 2003, the global governance initiative of the World Economic Forum began assessing what have been done to achieve this goal. The official report released on the 15th January 2004, it stated, for all its most important goals, the world is failing utterly to put forward the needed effort regarding hunger, and the report stated the problem is not an absolute shortage of food in the world. There is enough to go around, but the problem is available food and adequate nutrition do not get to those who lack the money or who need food at that moment. On the overall problems of poverty, the report stated its responsibility, lack of loss of performance now lies mainly with the governments of the suffering people, the rich and the poor, including both. But the global economic system designed by the wealthy is too often stuck against the poorest of the world. The Western corporation stated that 1% owns almost the entire wealth in the world. The wealthy country, despite the rhetoric, shows little interest in reforming the system or substantially increasing development assistance targeted to the poorest. The rich continue getting richer while the poor getting poorer. Such an unfair world we are living. The politicians continue to debate rather act, and the governments continue to maneuver and manipulate it for its own capitalist advantages. Meanwhile, the world's poor continue to have empty stomach. A fact sheet from the World Economic Forum entitled From Aspiration to Action warned that vast swathes of humanity will face increasing hunger. Unless international trade policies are changed, national policies focused on hunger and successful local efforts have doubled and multiplied. One broken promises may lead to a disappointment. Several broken promises by the United Nations may lead to distrust. By not keeping their words to care for the world's poor, governments have reaped distrust. In a world of ideology and reason, humanity can no longer maintain this burden. The United Nations will fail, so did the League of the Nations. Unless the case of might over right is solved and the strong nation must stop taking over weaker nation, by armed force or by a nuclear threat. It is not a word of a prophet, but perhaps a clear prophecy. The future is not like nay, but the future is now. Zionism and the idea of a new world order, population control, which amounts to the globalized genocide. The new world order of Zionism, a policy of global population control. Mankind population cannot be contained unless the evilest ideology of a new world order is established and applied. This new world order for the so-called peace on earth, but a show of force by the dominant powers, mainly members of the UN Security Council. The world can witness a globalized catastrophe before the year 3000. The entire world has been turned to a stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction or annihilation. Nations raging for an arms and might. Every corner of planet Earth, land, air and sea are all set up for the coming major devastated war. This nation will fail, so did the Roman Empire, Xerxes the Great of Persia, the pharaohs of Egypt, and all those who once claimed to be the rulers of the world. South China Sea has been the center of rivalry between China and its neighbors, which bring in the United States as a defender of its allies engaged in a territorial dispute. The North Koreans are speeding up its nuclear program and stockpiling its deadly and destructive weapons. The world was gripped by the fear of mass destruction as the North Koreans tested the latest hydrogen bomb, which causes magnitude 6.7 earthquake. The tremors of this explosion was felt across the Japanese coast. The world is threatened from every angle. The human evolution has come up with insanity, we can call it today. Man has set up the world in array for a very destructive battle. The Turks and the Russian rivalry in the disputed regions of the Black Sea, the unprecedented naval build-up in that part of the world. The United States has taken over Britain as the ruling state in the world. The world has been ruled from Washington. The United Kingdom has a mysterious ways with the Jews and with the Holy Land. That is the same way the United States has with the Jews now. The United States is flying high because it is about to be crushed. The Balfour Declaration of November 2nd, 1970s, the British declared its intention to create a Jewish national home in Palestine. 2 months later, it is the British army that marched its troops in Jerusalem after the defeat of the Ottoman Islamic Empire. In 1948, Britain is a state with a tremendous commitment to the rule of law. For every time Britain decolonized, there was always a legal transfer of power from the ruler to the ruled. But in 1948, when Britain left Palestine, it left it like a thief in the dark. For the first time in the British history, there was no legal transfer of power from the British to the Palestinian. In 1948, Britain acted as a midwife for a baby nation to be born, which is the Zionist state of Israel. The 21st century is a unit era right from the beginning of human existence. The era of the battle of ideology, being a capitalism, democracy, conservative, communism, and nationalism, Nazism, and Zionism. We have all sort of ideologies. This is a time where the world is facing a very serious crisis. This is a very serious crisis of our modern era. While corporate news tell lies to the world, making average citizens of the world blind to the reason, the media correspondents don't tell the source to the tension, like the Western media failed to cover the European intervention of the Middle East and North Africa. The mainstream media's silence on the Palestinian cries and struggles in the occupied lands of Palestine. From the primitive to the modern age, man has been so curious about the creation of the universe. This mystery would have been solved if the entire humanity was united under a single religion. The Torah of the Jews, the Bibles of the Christian, and even the Qurans of the Muslim all have taught us about the creation and the criterions of the universe. Humankind has been so curious about the existence of everything. Yet still man asks, where did the universe come from? Everything in existence, from the sky to the depths of the ocean, every shape, every color, and every pigment, every sound and every vibration, this whole art and everything. There was nothing that man wouldn't ask of. According to the books of the old, there was nothing. Then a great spirit came down and he said, hey, let there be. And so everything was. So according to this old book, that's how everything began. But I believe it is he who created me, created everything. So it is he who said, let there be light, and there was. It is he who separated the day from night. And everything that we worship, being it the temples, the mosques and everything, and all that frighten, the thunder and the lightning, all the saves and the God that we worship, humanity is still in curiosity. Billions of dollars invested in answering only these questions. Only these questions. Billions invested in the studies of the universe, space exploration, the Arctic exploration from the north to the southern pole, the underwater drones that travel to the depths of the ocean, nations, races to establish colonies and in space and in the moon, being it National Space Agency, NASA, or the European Space Agency, the Russians and the Chinese all have established facilities and command centers in the space. The dream of the United States to fulfill the Star Wars fantasy, setting up the land, air, sea, and the entire humanity for the Third World War. The nation prepared for a major war that has never taken place right from the beginning of creation. This is a war that humanity has never witnessed before. It is a war like no other wars has been. NATO is preparing for a war with Russia. This war has been planned long before the previous globalized wars by the evil forces, before the First World War and the Second World War. A clear evidence of this can be seen from a letter. A letter has been written by an American general called Albert Pike. Mr. Pike had dreamed about the three wars. Albert Pike specifically outlined equalist events that will lead to these wars: First World War, the Second and the Third World War. Albert Pike pushed forward for the organization of communism, Nazism and Zionism. These are the tools that will escalate the conflict. The Illuminatis will plunge the world into a Third World War by creating a religious conflict in the Middle East, or maybe in Palestine, which is the third holy site of Islam, which is about to be annexed by the Jews for the global satanic ritual. Today there are evidence we can see clear preparation for this war has been met. The Georgia Guidestones is a granite monument erected in the United States of America in Georgia. It contains 10 commandments, which include the reduction of global population to 500 million. Wow, which is going to be a catastrophe and a disaster for the entire humanity, because out of 7 billion people, with this new world order, they've claimed they will reduce the global population to 500 million. Yet still nobody knows the order of this commandment: for Israel to rule the world, to place the world in the hands of the Zionists. The main goal of World War I was to dismantle the rise of the Islamic State and create a Jewish state of Israel in Palestine after the fall of the Ottoman Islamic Empire and the end of the First World War. The arms race is no longer between the East and the West, but is an issue of globalization. The Middle East has been turned to a deadly weapons depot. The United States and its allies weapons sail to the Middle Eastern countries, which have devastated millions of lives. The arch rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia is now on its climax, with the rising wars in the Yemen and Syria. Without the United States multi-billion-dollar weapons sale to Saudi Arabia, there couldn't be a Saudi invasion of Yemen. Among those weapons, including the internationally banned cluster bomb and mustard, sarin and cyanide, sailed to Saudi Arabia. Today, we are witnessing and present in the center of human evolution, when man strikes his own brother and slaughter him for wealth, power and status. This was the ideology of the people of the whole world. Man thought to have reached the center of civilization, but yet still there is a long way to go. History keeps repeating itself. Technology is a modern enslavement tool. Man is living in a computerized world in which technology has become the essential tool of life. No nation is democratic unless the recognition of Palestine and the rejection of Zionist takeover of Palestine. Day by day, the suffering and the dissolution of Arab Muslims in the occupied land, the United States emphasized might over right in the issue of Palestine. It clearly exposed the hypocrisy in American democracy. The values of democracy are consolidated and entrenched in the United States of America because of the evilest desire it projected. Americans fly high with the freedom and liberty has exposed the violent spreading mentality of the United States. United States bloody wars in the Middle East give birth to the bloodiest terror groups in the Middle East and North Africa and even in Southeast Asia. Without United States, there couldn't be Al Qaeda in Pakistan. Without United States, Islamic State both in Iraq and Syria, even Hezbollahs in Yemen, which are there to tackle the rise of the Zionist state in Palestine.